Welcome back to Mastering Change. Today I'm joined by Chen Lizra, a somatic practitioner and founder of the Power of Somatic Intelligence. In this conversation, Chen explores how trauma disconnects us from our bodies and how movement, pleasure, and presence can help us come back. We talk about what it means to feel safe, how to work with the nervous system rather than override it, and why slowing down is often the bravest thing we can do. Let's get started. A very warm welcome to Chen Lizra to our podcast today.
Thank you very much for having me today.
As most of our listeners know, we start all of the podcasts with a little card game. The idea being that on one of these cards that I've selected from the pack at random, there is a prompt. And on that prompt, from that prompt, you will hopefully lead into a little narrative or a story which will help our audience connect to you and you connect to me. So I shall have a look at the card. It says, when I look at a photo of my younger self, I see ...
Ooh, that's a really interesting one. I see something with mixed feelings. You know, I had a very tough childhood because my mom got mentally sick. So on one hand, I was such a creative, happy child. And at the same time, like the trauma was so deep for me and what I had to go through. And it was such a tough journey that there are good memories, but there are really bad, hard memories at the same time. So it depends on which photo and what time of the, within my childhood.
So was there a certain time before when you'd have seen like a more of an innocent child and then a playful, creative child that you just talked about, and then another time that you'd see something different? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the age because there's like the time when I was just living, and then there was a time where there was no childhood anymore. Like that's it. It was gone. It was done. There's no more playing. And I don't mean that I wasn't allowed to play. I mean, just the experience of it was so. My mom got mentally sick, so it was so hard to be around her mental illness that it really shattered all of me. Really.
Yeah. How old were you when she got ill?
11. I was so young.
Yeah, so young. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing that, Hen. If you wouldn't mind, if you could introduce yourself in a few words to our audience so they get to know you a little bit more and how you relate to the field of trauma, mental health, and well-being.
As you said, my name is Chen, and I am the owner and the founder of the Power of Somatic Intelligence. And what I specialize in is healing trauma from the body in a somatic way, which means through the body. And as you can understand from the story that just came up, one of the reasons that it's so close to my heart is because I suffered a great trauma and actually carried for many years PTSD in my body from what happened. And this journey really started with wanting to heal myself. But it took 3 decades to figure out my kind of trauma and how to heal it. It was so complex that I became an expert about it. And I really didn't want people to have to spend 3 decades after someone did the hard work, because it's just so devastating to try and so many things don't work, that I wanted for people to be able to come to a place where someone already did the research and has all the answers for them. And then someone who can guide them to get there quickly, in a year, in 3 months, in 6 months, rather than 3 decades. So that's what the Power of Somatic Intelligence is all about. It's about the wisdom in our body that allows us to tap into what goes on inside us so that we can heal and we can get to what we really want in life and live an incredible life.
Fabulous, thank you. So you talked about your particular trauma that was so complex and took sort of you personally 3 decades to heal. Why is it you think that certain traumas, or do you think that all trauma takes that long to or could take that long to heal? Or is there a specific, so why do you think certain traumas are so hard to heal? Yeah, I'll start with that. Is there a reason?
So let's start with the fact that not all traumas are the same. There are traumas that are lighter, there are traumas that are deeper. For example, I had a client once who came and worked with me and she got raped 26 times. Someone who got raped 26 times is not the same as someone who has a trauma because their parents weren't present, and that blocked them in some way, but it's not the same as someone violated your body in a way, over and over and over and over. This, that kind of trauma will take a lot more work to heal and will take a much longer time. Not only that, but it's like certain traumas also can fracture our emotional base. So our emotional base is usually somatically is around our pelvic area, further down the body. And in our formative years are the most important years in creating them, but also, the same as for me, 11 is still a very young age. So when the base is fractured, emotionally fractured, not physically fractured, it's harder to heal the trauma. So like, to give you an example, I was with a client today, and her emotional trauma happened in the first 4 years, where she just didn't get the anchoring. When you have your parents, you need to feel safe, and that there's something to lean on, and that you can count on it, on your parents, the family, but your parents, to be able to anchor in them, to know that you're going to be provided for, you're going to be held emotionally, you're going to be loved, you're going to be taken care of. If that is not there, your emotional foundation can kind of crack at the base. And then it's much harder to heal it, because you don't believe in yourself in basic things. There's like a center, a core that's missing, it can be still healed, but that's harder to heal than someone who, let's say, got to the age of 18 or 15 and something happened, because they already had a good foundation, right? So it really depends on what happened in your life that caused it, and how deep to the root it went. When a trauma comes in as well, that is, you're so identified with, that even though it's something that happened to you, but you're so identified, like it's who you are, it's also harder to shift, because you kind of need to separate from the trauma to be able to shift that, and to be able to understand that, letting go of that, there's still a core that is you that can move. So it really depends on what is there, but there's definitely traumas that are harder to heal. And when people have traumas that are harder to heal, and they don't understand the why it is that way, and they try many different things. I see this all the time in my work with clients. They're trying a lot of things, and the trauma doesn't get healed from what they're doing. Then they start to really assume that something's broken in them, that they're messed up, that something's wrong with them. And then there's the whole negative self-talk that goes in, that makes it even makes it harder to heal as well.
The one thing, I mean, I don't know, it's always been my understanding that you can't really compare traumas like that, though, because I think obviously, the examples you gave, I mean, are horrendous, but I think from my understanding of sort of Bessel's work and the other work of the people in this space, it's not the trauma that happens to you, but it's actually how you physiologically respond to that trauma. So you might have had, multiple rapes, or you might have had horrendous atrocities happen to you, but actually physiologically you haven't responded in the same way as someone else who perhaps has had, neglectful parents, or parents who weren't present. And that might be because, I mean, from what I remember of Bessel's work, is that it says it's the support system that you have around you once the experience has happened. So if you have had, multiple atrocities happen to you, but every time after each rape or after each violation, there has been a supportive system around you, and that you've been able to kind of be held up and cared for in a way that has enabled you to process that trauma, then the next time I have, I mean, God, it would just, I can't even imagine that, and I very much doubt, obviously, that many people who've been violated 26 times have had that supportive structure in place to stop them from having that kind of PTSD.
It wouldn't have happened. No, but it wouldn't have. That's exactly the point. You're absolutely right in what you're saying and what you're bringing up. First of all, trauma is not about what happened to you, but how it impacted you. Absolutely. We're talking right now two different things, right? So first of all, how it impacted you. Someone can have something really big happen, and something can have something small, but it meant something so big and it went so deep. Absolutely right. I'm talking about the fact that there are certain things that happen that go so deep, but they're harder to heal. So I was giving you that, but having a support system. So part of the healing of this is being able to, that someone would be there with you and help you move through that and feel with you what happened. That's part of what heals it. Someone who got raped 26 times, obviously there wasn't that around. That was the problem, because if there was someone going through the first rape with you and feeling with you, they would also prevent that from ever happening again. That's someone that was like abandoned in such a big way, where that person wasn't there specifically for that one. I can't give the details of what happened, but that abandonment there was so huge that that's part of what wasn't working. You're absolutely right, though, that the support system of what the person has around has a big impact on what the experience is going to be from this, and whether that's going to leave that stain or not. So, for example, look at a good example, like an international example. Think of Crocodile Dundee, the Steve Irwin, right? And how he died from the stingray. And if you look at his children, there's no trauma. And why is there no trauma? Because Terry, the mother, made sure that when that happened, she went to get help. I actually watched all of her interviews because I was really interested how her kids don't carry trauma and live such healthy lives. And she learned that you have to process a grief in a really healthy way. And she allowed them to also feel the grief and express it. And they moved in a very healthy way through that. And that didn't get stuck in their bodies. So no trauma was created. Grief, yes. Pain, yes, but no trauma.
Yeah.
Absolutely right in what you said. Absolutely right.
So that's exactly, I think that was that's great. I'm glad we're on the same page. I just wanted to make sure that, because I think it is that how someone experiences the event, and then how the support system or not is there to show up. So, I mean,
just to add something small to this, you talked about the support system. When I'm talking about my own trauma, my grandma was there to love me, and the way she loved me, I always say that she was my lighthouse that saved me, because I was in such despair. I suffered 10 years of suicidal thoughts because my reality was so hard. But feeling her love for me is what, and it was interesting because it was Esther Perel at a dinner thing that asked me this, and she said her husband specializes in trauma. And she said, like, who was there for you when I told the story? And I said, my grandma. She said, yeah, there's usually somebody, they were talking about this, that there's like usually somebody who will be there and will be your anchor in that sense and will give you that love, and that will help you come through. Absolutely right.
Yeah, amazing. So going back to your story, then you had 3 decades of trying to heal what was obviously an extremely complex traumatic history. That how did you come to find something, which I am, based on what you say you do now, and you're the founder of a business that works with somatics. How did you find that it was kind of the somatics that were needed to help heal effectively?
This is kind of like a really interesting story, because I've always worked with my body since I was 7 years old. And I was a gymnast, and I've always danced because I had control of my body. I've become, at 30, I became a professional dancer because I was just always dancing. And I created the Cuban Dance Academy in Canada for 10 years, and I was teaching through dance. And as I was working with people, I started seeing patterns, and I started seeing things in people, like the way they were learning how to dance, the way they were showing up in the dance, exactly how they were living their lives. And I went to Cuba to train. And as I was training in Cuba, there was something that was happening to my body that was healing my trauma. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? What do they have here? And why is it healing my trauma? Can I learn it? Can I extract it? Can I bring it other places? Could I teach it? Would it work with people not from the culture, and so on? And I've spent about 15 years in Cuba, back and forth, and learning those 5 elements that I created. I'm the founder of the method, the 5 elements of somatic intelligence. And I've learned that embodiment, one of the key elements, not the only one, but one of the key elements is the sabrosura, the divine feminine energy. And a divine feminine energy is connected to motherly love. So it's really interesting, because when you work with it, and when I bring it into the work, a lot of times you'll see people break down and cry, because it touches that wound of what you didn't receive. The good news is that we have it in our body innate. We're born with it. And a mother can just teach you how to connect with it. It's not like she has to give it to you. It's not in your body. So you could learn it even at a later point from someone else who embodies it. But this sabrosura, I wrote it down. It connects us to feelings of love, bonding, vulnerability, softness, caring, compassion, trust, safety. So you can see how it's like these qualities are very much connected to healing as well. So as I was learning through the dance at the time, that was in the method that I was using to heal people. But as I was learning that, things were releasing. So just to give you an example, I was taken into this dance that has so much sabrosura and so much softness. And it was so tender that I started to have pain in my body. And I said to my teacher, I can't do this. It's like, it really hurts. And I think it has to do with the trauma, what happened to me. And I explained to her and she said, move through it. And I said, I'm really scared. And she said, just breathe into it. And as you're doing it, just move through it. And my whole body just went like dot, 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 like pain all over. And it was scary because when we feel those things, trauma gets created because we cannot integrate the experience into our nervous system. And especially when we're young, the nervous system is so young and that thing that happens is so big and there's no room for it. So we shut it down if we're lucky enough to protect our nervous system. Suddenly we need to bring it out. And the memory of the body is from that little child. It's like, it seems like a mountain, right? But your nervous system has evolved. You're now a mature human being. You have a lot more capacity. You could move through it, but we don't know that. Because remember how scary that was, right? So it was super scary, like all the bells and whistles, you're like, fight or flight mode turned on. It's like sweating. And it's like, so I was like, okay, let's do this, and I'm moving with all this tenderness and softness. And like my whole body's like dots, 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 like of pain, 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 pain. And I feel kind of weak. And it's like, almost like you're in a tunnel, when you're driving and the lights are like, whoosh, 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 whoosh. And I'm like, oh, am I ever going to get to the end? Because I'm like, I'm in pain. And it's like, and then after a while, it was like you start to see the end of the tunnel, and then it came out the other side. I was like, oh wow, it released. And at the beginning, it was so scary to move through these things because every time the body would go with all the bells and whistles, it's like, I've learned over time that it's a smoke screen. So it's like we're so scared to move through that because we're afraid to feel it. But if we're able to, we release. So it was scary to go to it. But whenever, in the beginning, I used to resist like 5 hours. I would have 5 hours of classes and I would be like resisting. So once the end, I would be so tired. I was like, oh, whatever. And then the teacher would go like, finally, you surrendered. And then I learned to let go and just trust, because that's part of what breaks when there's trauma is that you don't trust something bad happened and you don't trust. So I've learned to just go in and trust and move through it. And I moved again and again and again. And I just released and released and released. And then I kind of claimed those fragmented parts back and just integrated it back. So one of the things that I do is that I help clients when I'm working with the sabrosura and the divine feminine is to do it in a more gradual way that is not so overwhelming and just kind of regulate it in a way that their body can, but use that process so that they can, one, understand what is going on and why it's so scary, and then be able to move through that in a way that just allows them to little by little till they can fully release that. So we move through a lot of stuff through the body.
And what is the process then? What is it that you do with your clients when you're doing something like this to help them get in touch with that divine feminine and let go?
Well, I use typically 3 methods that I found over 30 years the most effective and the fastest to get results. One of it is witnessing the felt experience, being able to connect my nervous system to the other person, help them feel what they're feeling, and help them kick that mechanism that allows whatever got frozen that they're afraid to feel again, and then for the body to discharge it. So that's one thing. And the more you get received by someone who feels with you, you're being met in those places where you got abandoned emotionally. You talked about before about support. Any place that we didn't have support, it's like we got abandoned emotionally. When we have someone suddenly helping us come back and feel with us, suddenly we're able to bring it to the surface because we can kind of recreate that in that sense and bring it to the surface, get witnessed, and then discharge it from the body. And then that restores those places where we got blocked. That's one method. The second one is basically the 5 elements of somatic intelligence, which is the method that I'm the founder of. And that's where we're working with the elements like the sabrosura. And then the work is embodiment work. So If it's online, there are certain things that we can do online. I'm teaching right now, for example, a course where I'm doing half of it is witnessing and half of it is embodiment. And then we do practices. So practices might be practices related to breath plus movement of sabrosura. And then as you're doing the embodiment work, what would happen is that each element is connected to a benefit. And then whatever is there will come to the surface. If I'm working, let's say, with elegance, elegance is the element of confidence and self-worth. So if there's anything there around self-worth or confidence that's hurt, those things are going to come to the surface. And then we can come with a felt experience and we can discharge that from the body. So it's almost like the embodiment kind of flashes it out. And then we come with the witnessing and then we process and release. And in that sense, bring back the body to its natural state. The third method that I use, which I found to
Can
be...
I ask a question about the second method? So
course.
the element of the element of elegance, so that's connected to self-worth. And so how would you work with the element of elegance? Would you ask them questions? Would it be kind of like a...
No, it would be body work. So for example, if I'm, just to kind of explain so it's a little bit easier. So if I'm sitting like this, let's say, and you're seeing me sitting like this, that says a lot already. My embodiment.
For our listeners that aren't watching you, so to explain how you're sitting. So you're sitting...
I'm sitting right now with my chest collapsed in, and I'm kind of like a little bit more protective, and I'm a little bit more curved in, and everything is a little bit more closed, right? So now I'm basically going to pull up every vertebra in my back. I'm going to open up my chest. I'm going to come into what we call an embodiment of elegance, which is a power pose. And that changes in 2 minutes our confidence and our sense of presence, right? And that also touches anything that has to do, so when anything that has to do with self-worth. So as we're changing how we're standing, sitting, walking, moving with our body, that's our embodiment. Our embodiment is the sum of all of our experiences. We're embodied as what we experienced in life. So someone who experienced heartbreak or, are afraid of life are going to tend to curl more in and, kind of like a little bit more be reserved and a little bit push the world out. And someone who's, embodied in their confidence is someone who's more out there and more open and more upright and a little bit more present in their body, right? So as I'm changing someone from one embodiment to the other, what is there that is unprocessed related to that is going to come emotionally to the surface. So we're doing the body work where we're changing how you're moving, how you're shaped into something new, and that brings the stuff that needs to be met to the surface.
And so will someone come into your clinic then, into your office, and you will sort of see how they're sitting, how they walked in, how they are, just how they embody themselves, and then kind of work on that? Or will they bring something to you generally? How does it normally work?
So there's two things here. So it depends on how we work. If we're working one-on-one, typically I will do a somatic intelligence assessment, and I would first of all create an emotional blueprint of what is going on so I can understand exactly what they're complaining about and then find the root of it. Because if you want to make something disappear here, that's a symptom, you have to find the root and then heal it at the root. If not, you're just dealing with the echo. And then doesn't disappear, another one will come. But if you go straight to the root of what's not working and you heal it here, that thing that they complained about will disappear. When it comes to the body, I can tell a lot when I see people and, the way they carry themselves. I went to a wedding one day and I looked at this girl and it was like, I came to her parents. I said, is it okay if I ask you something? And they said, yeah. I said, I hope I'm not priding, but it's like, did something happen to your daughter? And they said, why? I said, because she's like so inward and like you can see that something happened to her and I'm a little concerned about her. Is she okay? And they were like, oh my God, how do you know? Like she was bullied in school and she had a really tough time. And it's like, and you could really see it, So there's a lot of things that you can see and how people carry themselves that need adjustments before you even work on it. I don't go around, sitting, let's say, at a party with friends and do that. Like sometimes people say to me, like, oh, so are you right now like an analyzing me? Like, no, I'm not at work. No. But I can definitely, if I turn it on, I can definitely tell you a lot of things about people and how they're living their lives, and also shift a lot of things for people that they want to. So I like to usually do that more with, I do all the coaching and the programs online. We do that via Zoom. And then there's certain programs where people come to work face to face, where we do more embodiment work and the things that we cannot do. So like, for example, with the sabrosura, when you're using touch, for example, that's really powerful. And that can be so healing, especially if there was sexual trauma. If someone now touches you in such a way, like that will bring up a lot of stuff and again, could be healed. So that could be really powerful, but it's like, you couldn't do that online because there's no touch, right? So there's certain things that are better to do face to face, and there are certain things that you can do online.
Okay. Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. I'm sorry, I jumped in. I just had those questions about the second thing. And that the third, was that the third? Then the touch was the third way of...
No, the third is not the touch. So no, you have a good question. It is good because I'm sure that as you ask the question, someone is going to be listening like, wait a minute, I didn't get that part, right? So it's good you jumped again. No, the third method that I use, which I find to be super impactful, is ayahuasca ceremonies in Peru with a shamanic family that I facilitate with. So shamanic family adopted me in. They have their traditions of thousands of years. I go to the Amazons and I take people with me that want to work through plant medicine and plant dieta as well. And those who want, sometimes you have things that are so rooted that even with all the work that usually works, it's just, you need something more to be able to shift it. And in 1 week in the Amazons, we can shift those things powerfully in ways that nothing else works on them. So, and it doesn't have to be only if there's something that you want to shift. There's also sometimes people come because they just want to improve their life, or they want to see the vision of what's next, or they just want more, But for healing trauma, that's a very powerful tool in the toolkit to have for those who are open to it. It's also not for everybody. Some people don't want to do plant medicine, right? So it's another option.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's definitely a way of expediating. Sometimes you can get so far with, talk therapy and then somatic work, and then there's still, as you say, there's just that little bit more that you need to shift and you can't do it. And I think plant medicine can be that thing, that key, that final key that kind of unlocks, and it unlocks it in a much faster, like you said, way than I think anything else that has currently existed. My only kind of
Exactly
caveat and concern around that is that to make sure that there is the kind of integration afterwards, after you do any kind of work.
When I'm doing the work, I created a special retreat where, because I'm a somatic coach, I do preparation work. I'm with them there and I help them integrate already there. And then there's integration work afterwards. So I created a somatic package around that, which is, you're absolutely right. When you go to jungle, it's jungle rough. Right. So I kind of created a package with preparation, explain to them how things work and what to expect. And then all of the stuff, including preparation, integration, and being there with them. I drink the medicine when I'm there as a facilitator. So I'm drinking it for them. And I asked Mother Aya and the maestra and the family to guide me in that direction so that I know how to support them and what they need. It's not about me. It's about them when I'm there, which is also very powerful. Like I had last time somebody who went through sexual trauma, and she said that having me as her anchor, that she could anchor in me, was like, she's never experienced that, because that was, we talked before about someone being there for her. She was abandoned in a situation as a child. So to have someone root for her that way, the facilitator of the center and me were with her the whole night and helping her move through it. And she came back and she healed her trauma. She said that it was like having sex with her boyfriend for the first time. She finally could trust in ways she never could. She was like, now I understand what an anchor is, when someone is an anchor for you. It was beautiful. It was just so beautiful. And you're absolutely right. There's nothing that moves that fast in healing as this does. And you have to move at the pace that the body can. One of the things I always tell my clients, I go you're not the boss. And they look at me like, what? I go I'm not the boss. And they go okay. I go, your body is the boss. Each body has a different way of reacting and a pace that it can heal, right? Like you said it so beautifully before. Trauma is not what happened to you, it's how it impacted you. So it's very different from person to person. And we're also coming into the process when we're working with someone after doing certain work or not doing work. Like every person is different, right? So being able to understand the wisdom of your body, how your body responds, what it means, like having that kind of an interpreter is so important. I was with a client today, and we like the last week we were trying, she just started with me, and we were trying to figure out like what her body would react well to. And I give her all sorts of things. Everything was reactivating her body. The really what she needs at this moment is holding and soothing. And that's what I said to her today. Your body spoke loudly. We can't do any of that at this moment. We're going to come back to it, but this is not the time. But if there wasn't someone who would pull her back, then she would start to go like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Why is nothing working, right? And then you start to blame yourself. But it's her body right now is like, it's like you've got a wound and someone's like constantly touching on that wound and the body just flares, right? So understanding what your body is saying and then understanding how to come to it, understanding like through somatics, we can understand so much and go, I give you this practice or that practice, and I see how your body responds. I can tell a lot. I do the sabrosura. I have the different practices, and I go, I do these and tell me which one activated, which ones were easy. Will come in through the easy, but when they tell me which one activate them, I already understand a lot about what the trauma is and that what we need to do. But there's always a soft place to come where it's really gentle, where your body will respond well to, and that's the trick to find it.
Yeah, I think that's amazing and beautiful. And I really like, I think even, once if you have managed to heal past traumas, there's always things and grief and things that come up in our day-to-day lives that, need processing. But if you're able, if you're in tune with your body enough to understand when it's safe to allow those feelings to come up, when it's safe to allow that grief to be processed or that whatever it is, you can then, for me personally, like recently my father died and you know, I didn't have this kind of big breakdown that I kind of expected I might have, but it was just this kind of soft, gentle, I would take my dog for a walk. And pretty much any time I went out for a walk, I would be able to cry because it was obviously in that moment that I felt my body felt safe enough, my nervous system felt regulated enough that I could process those feelings and then come out of it and be fine. And then be, and the next time I'd go for a walk, the same thing would happen, but it would be in my day-to-day life, I was able to show up and be fine and not be overwhelmed by the grief or the sadness. So
Beautiful. And when you were going for walks, was that in nature?
yeah, it was.
That also helps. So nature has its own rhythm. And, it's not for nothing that some people like to sit in front of the sea, for example, if you live by the sea, because the sea has such healing power. It takes away a lot of what you're feeling. The same with a river, the same with like trees, so it's not surprising to me. So your body, for example, I can already tell responds really well to nature, and it will make it easier for you to process when you're in nature versus when you're in the city, let's say.
100%. Like, I mean, I'm in London now and I've been in New York and then I'm in London and I'm already feeling I'm going home. I'm lucky to have two houses. I have one place in London and one place in the hills of South Wales where there is nothing but green surrounding me. Green fields, cows, sheep, my horses, etc., my dog. And when I go home there, I just feel there's something about the land and me just being in that green expanse that I feel safe, and actually the funny thing is I've never been less safe in my life than I was growing up there with my own mother and trauma and history and stuff. However, um, there's something about being that connected to nature that when I'm there that has always made me feel safe. I always wanted to go back even when it wasn't safe, or when it didn't feel safe, but ultimately it must have been, I think.
Well, you processed what you needed from the past in order to be able to let go of that, and that became your little sanctuary. What is really interesting in your system is that your system is wired for nature. You even mentioned the horses, my horses, right? So it's like it's not just the nature, it's the animals that help you as well. I bet that you're like sometimes touch your horse and like right, and that calms you down. It's that connection. You have a strong connection to nature and to animals, and that's part of your healing process when you need to process. For me was, for example, drawing. I used to sit there with colors and I drew at the age of 20 a self-portrait. When you see it, it's crazy. Like to see how I saw myself and how I felt about myself, like it's crazy. But that's how I could express that. That's how I could let it out. The same as singers sing, right? Our system always has a way And I think to me, as a specialist in trauma, my interest is to come in to understand the system, to understand how that system works. And I'm very quickly, I can decode it and then kind of come in and kind of align with it and then go with how that system goes. And that's a very soft way to come in. I've heard someone who spoke a while back and he said, like, he had a very masculine, aggressive way. And he said, yeah, we come into it and it's just like, well, you got to come in. And then, yes, I go like, but it will trigger it. And he goes like, yeah. And then you got to be strong enough to move through that. I was like, okay, like that's just in a trauma situation. That's like so hard. It's like, it's a very masculine way. But I really believe that for men as well, like when you bring that sabrusura, when you bring that softness, I seen men, for example, a lot of them have been taught, especially in Ireland, Scotland, and the UK, but not only to be stoic.
Mm.
That the word stoic comes up a lot, where the women can go into emotions really quickly, and the man is like, "Oh, wait, like I'm losing being stoic here." So to be able to land into that in a softer way and to take away the shame and normalize that it's okay that you're feeling that way, especially that men tend to hide more than the women normally. And then to be able to land into what you're really feeling so you can release it is such a liberation, right? So someone coming in with a soft way and understanding your system and how it responds and if something comes easy, create wins because wins create confidence and more courage to go further in. And it's easier when something starts easy to kind of grow that into more. Yeah.
But I have a question about the Sabbath Sorda or the divine feminine divine energy that we're kind of talking about. And you sort of mentioned the you mentioned men there, and I guess my question is, is Sabbath Sorda or the feminine divine more impactful or more helpful on healing someone's trauma when the trauma has been kind of like a mother wound, or is it is it helpful for any kind of trauma, do you think, or do you know?
It can work with a lot of different, I can't say all traumas. It depends on what the trauma is. But for example, if there was sexual abuse, it's really important. If it was mother trauma, for sure. If there was lack of affection, that could be lack of, if there was physical abuse, someone beat you up, right? Like having that tenderness and that softness and someone touching you, there's different kind of wounding. But it doesn't mean that you need always a sabrosura. For me, the sabrosura was an example for you of one of the elements, but there's the 5 elements of elegance, intention, tempo, sabrosura, and mystery. So this is why I say when I do the assessment, I look to see what element is missing. It doesn't mean that what you're missing is a sabrosura. Maybe what you miss is elegance. Today I was working in the online program and 2 of the clients were having a hard time embodying intention. And that's where they need the biggest breakthrough. And typically where your weakest element, if you work the hardest on it, that's where you're going to see the biggest breakthrough. And that's what I said to them today. I said, look at how you're kind of struggling. We're talking about intention. You're struggling to do the homework this week because that's your weak element. And that's where we want to avoid it. And we want to go, if it's uncomfortable, I don't want to go there. My weakest element used to be the sabrosura. And I worked on it so hard because I wasn't good at it. And that's what really shifted my life. If you met me 15, 20 years ago, I was such a hard shell. Like you wouldn't, there wasn't like all this like on the outside. It was inside. It was always there. But it's like, I was so afraid of being hurt again. And I was so afraid of being abandoned. And I was so afraid of so many things that I created this protection and no one, unless it was someone that was close to me, no one could get close to me. So it took a long time to kind of melt those walls. I like to say melt because some people are like, oh, break those walls. No, don't break any walls. It's like, it's about melting them. It's about bringing that sweetness, back. It's about being able to touch that tender part of you that might feel at first a little scary to bring out. And then to be able to be on the outside who you really are, your true self, and not have one person be at work and then a different person be in your life in duality, but be the same person everywhere. Right. And to be able to find that balance of how you just show up and heal. So it's really dependent on what the person is missing out of the 5 elements to create that balance. The 5 elements together are our true nature. and we're born into the world already in our true nature, then we destroy what was there. So it's really about bringing you back into what was there and bringing you back in that sense into nature, right? You reset in nature because it allows you to kind of come back to something that's just natural that you don't even need to think about. You can feel it, right? So if we're able to come back to that in ourselves, into our core, into our center, into our inner alignment, and then operate from that place, magic happens in love and career and all of it.
Amazing. Well, Shen, I'm very conscious of time, so I'm just going to ask you the question that we ask all of our podcast guests, and that is, in a world that is rife with anxiety, doubt, fear, mistrust, on a macro level in terms of like geopolitical, climate anxiety, etc., and then bringing it into like a more micro level into like our communities and our society and our friendship groups, colleagues, families, and even with ourselves, we feel this kind of disconnection and anxiety often. If there was one lever you could pull or one button you could press that could make the change you'd like to see happen in the world, what would that lever be? What would that button be?
I would take all of the world leaders that are trying to turn us into dictatorship and smash the liberal world and send them on an ayahuasca, not 1 week, but like at least 1 month retreat. That would be the lever, like the one that I would basically do, because we have so many people that have lost their souls. They're out of alignment. They're not connected to themselves. They're not embodied anymore. And they're leading in ways that are all about power and greed. And to be able to take all of the different leaders that we see in the world and basically bring them back into compassion and alignment and back into balance with nature and caring about the people and not just about themselves, and really wanting to make a difference and not to smash the world. That would be a dream come true.
That would be amazing. Oh my God, that would be so good. Ojalá.
A month minimum, not less, because it's a week. I don't think they can come back to alignment. They're so lost.
I agree. Well, thank you so much, Shen. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on this podcast. It really has been. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me today. It's been a blast.
Thank you.